Unbroken, the podcast with Madeline Black. Healing through storytelling.
Hello and welcome to Unbroken, the podcast with me, Madeline Black, where I am interviewing inspiring people that have overcome tragedy or adversity, and they haven't just bounced back, they have bounced forward. And my guest today is Sarah Claudia Tillman. Sarah Claudia Tillman is a writer and public speaker who is passionate about encouraging women to walk by faith, not by sight. After losing her sight and partial hearing in 2015, she has embarked on a journey that both tested and strengthened her faith. Through her challenges, she has found an immense amount of joy sharing how God continually turns her trials into even greater triumphs through her blog, her podcast, her radio show, and her public speaking. Her ultimate goal is that through her testimony, women will be encouraged to face the trials of this world through the trust in the Lord. Welcome, Sarah Claudia. How lovely to have you on my show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
You're welcome. So the very first question that I ask every guest that comes on the show, because my podcast is called Unbroken, what does the word unbroken mean to you?
Unbroken to me means, I feel like there's so much stigma in the world around any sort of trials or hardships people face, and people think, oh, she's broken, she's got something wrong. But I think it's taking control of that word again and saying, no, I'm not broken. I might look like I don't have it all together, but really my pieces are all put together in the way that the Lord and God and my faith has put them. So that's kind of what it means to me.
So your pieces weren't always put together in this same way that they are at the moment. Can you take us back to when you were just 20, weren't you, about 5 years ago, and you went into hospital for a simple operation? You went in to get your tonsils out.
Yes, I was 20 years old. Like you said, I had just finished up my junior year at college, and I had suffered with tonsillitis for most of my life. And, looking back, it was something I would have definitely dealt with for the rest of my life. But we made the decision to have my tonsils taken out, and I went to the hospital. Everything went fine. So we thought. I was discharged after the surgery, and my mom, being the loving, doting mother that she is, actually slept with me that night when I got home.
Aww,
and looking back, at the moment, to her, it was such an insignificant decision, but that ultimately is what saved my life. That's the reason I'm able to sit here and talk with you today, because she woke up about 3:00 in the morning and she thought, well, I'll just try to give her some water, make sure her throat's feeling okay, and make sure everything's healing up. And when she came over to my bed, she found me completely unresponsive.
She couldn't wake you up at all?
Nope. She was shaking me, and I was kind of taking kind of raspy breaths and was just completely out of it. So she called my dad, who rushed upstairs, and they called an ambulance. And now my parents live in the middle of the country in Georgia, over in the US. So the ambulance had a hard time finding our house. Okay. So that was, I'm sure, very scary for them. But once I was finally back at the hospital, they immediately intubated me and placed me on a ventilator. And at that point, the waiting just began.
You're completely unaware at this point, are you?
Mm-hmm.
You've no idea.
Yeah, I don't remember any of this.
You have no idea you've been moved from your bed to you've been back now in hospital.
No, and it's crazy because I don't even remember anything leading up to the surgery. After I woke up and told, I woke up a day after they had put me on the ventilator, and one of the first things that I said was to my dad, who happens to be an eye doctor, and I told him that I couldn't see anything. So I don't remember any of this, but my parents tell me that I was relatively calm at that point because I think I was just so medicated. But when I was rushed to another hospital after I told them that I couldn't see, that's when it really, I think, started to sink in for me. I was having all these tests and scans done, and I just kept asking, why can't I see? Why can't I see?
It must have been a very scary time for you.
Mm-hmm. It was, and like I said, I don't remember anything, but just hearing the stories and thinking, at some point I had to have been knowing what was going on. And I think my memory was just wiped out from the trauma and the shock, because I think your body does that just as a way to kind of try to protect itself. But the first memories I have, or 2 weeks after I came home, I kind of started to get over all the medication and the shock, and just not knowing what to do. Like, I spent a lot of those days on the couch just crying and being completely devastated, because I just had no idea how to move forward. It was something that was so unfamiliar.
And it wasn't just your sight, it was also the hearing in one ear, I believe, as well.
Yes, that we figured out this the second hospital I was in. My aunt, I believe it was my aunt, who called on the phone, and my mom gave me the phone. She said, "Your aunt wants to talk to you and check on you." So I put the phone up to my left ear, and I just got so frustrated. I was like, I cannot hear anybody. There's nobody on the line. And we just kept going back and forth. And finally, I switched the phone over to my right ear, and I could hear loud and clear. So that is how we realized that I had completely lost hearing in my left ear.
And do they have any idea why you had this extreme reaction? I guess, had you slipped into a coma? Is that what had happened?
It was close to that. They say that really just a reaction to all the medication I was given. That's the best guess we have. And the reason that my eyes and my ear was damaged was the lack of oxygen damaged my optic nerve and then my auditory nerve.
Okay.
So it's crazy, but it's also a huge blessing. Nobody can say why my right ear was not affected at all. It doesn't make any sense. So
You'll have
that's
hearing,
definitely
won't it? Because that would be a double whammy, wouldn't it? No sight, no hearing. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Cool. But I was reading some of your blog posts on your website, which I should just encourage everyone to read. They're really quite inspirational. And you used to sleep with the light on in your bedroom. You were scared of the dark. And then here you are, 20 years old, plunged into permanent darkness, really.
Yes. It was terrifying. I had very bad nightmares for the first few months, really. I would wake up screaming, and it was one of those things where you think you're awake, but you're not really awake. So I was screaming, but no sound was coming out, and I was just terrified of being in the dark, and I was terrified of it being forever. And that was kind of where I was for the first few months, just wishing it away so badly. And I think we all have situations like that where we just want so badly for it to change, and that was my mindset.
And your diagnosis is that it is permanent damage. They don't think it's likely to reverse or go back to how it was.
No, because of the optic nerve just doesn't like to regenerate itself. And like I said, my dad's an eye doctor, so he's made it his life mission to find some kind of treatment. So we've been all over the world. I went to China just a few months after. I went to Germany, lots of places over in the US, Florida and Tennessee, and all over Atlanta, trying to find treatments. And there just isn't a lot of hope right now, but like my dad says, they're always working on things.
It must be frustrating for your dad. That's his line of business. I bet he never thought he would be dealing with his daughter situation.
No, it's been shocking for everybody, and especially for my parents. I always say, I don't remember anything from that time, but they had to watch me go through all that. So on some level, it's been hard, just as hard, or maybe even harder on them.
Well, I am a parent. I'm more than likely the age as your parent, because my youngest child is 19. So I can't begin to imagine how I could best support someone that's now going through something that I'd never experienced.
Yeah,
how did you begin to come out of the nightmares and out of the disbelief? I guess it must have been complete shock from these nightmares. Must have come from the place of shock.
Definitely. And my faith has been a huge help for me. And I was raised as a Christian, but I never really had a personal relationship with Christ, or really, I wouldn't even say I had faith, back then. I was kind of just going through the motions. I went to church because I was supposed to, because my parents took me and told me to. So that was kind of where I was at this time.
Yeah.
But
You were being a good girl. Your parents said, come
Yeah.
along, you went along. But you
exactly,
interested.
exactly.
So what
it was-
changed?
Well, it was kind of like that Sunday school answer. That's what we say over here in the US. You have that Sunday school answer. What do you do when you don't know what to do? Well, you pray. And, you know, people say that when you post on Facebook that you're going through a hard time and say, oh, I'll pray for you. But it's kind of just like those are words. You don't really expect them to pray for you or even that to help. But I knew, okay, I don't know how to move forward, so I'm just going to pray. And that was what I had been taught all my life. So I started praying, and at the beginning it was just prayers for healing. I would go to bed every night and I would tell God, okay, when I wake up, just let me be able to see. And I became more and more frustrated each day as I woke up, and I felt like those prayers weren't being answered. But something kept me going. It kept me talking to God. And each day I noticed, okay, my prayers started to get a little bit longer, because I've always been the kind of person, I don't like being vulnerable with other people. And I learned early on that when I would talk to my parents and my family about my problems, it would just make them so upset that they would cry, and then I would feel bad.
You don't like being vulnerable, and yet you must be plunged into the most vulnerable making situation ever.
Exactly. But I learned that I could be completely vulnerable with God. I could just go to my bed at night and lay there and cry and just let out everything I was struggling with. And it sounds, even today when I say it, it sounds so strange, but I just felt this peace come over me through those prayers. Like I felt a strength and a courage, and all of a sudden my thoughts went from what am I going to do to, okay, I have this disability, I have this situation, but why can't I move forward? And it was just a mindset change just like that, from those weeks of just laying my heart out to God.
Say just like that, but it's quite a transformation, isn't it? From
Yes.
hating the situation and praying that you can see again to finally, I guess, really accepting it and going, okay, this is my lot. What am I going to do about it?
Exactly. And it's not, I don't want anybody to think it was like a one-step thing. It's something that I still have to deal with every day. And you know,
You're still young, aren't you? You're only 25 now. So it's only been 5 years ago that all this happened to you.
Yeah, it's been, but grief it's a cycle, and it's not like you go through the steps and you're done. You're always circulating through them. So I fall back in those depths of depression and denial, and that's when I have to go back to those days, those early days, and think, how did I get out of it then? And I go back to prayer, and the Lord and my family was a ginormous support. I couldn't have done it without them.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have a brother and sister. They're actually twins. They're older. So they were wonderful. They both supported me in their own different ways, which was great. My sister actually got engaged when I was in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
So that was a big distraction. Planning her wedding and getting to be there with her all along the way was a good thing. It was emotional, but it helped me, I think.
And your brother was a support as well?
Yes, definitely. He's kind of comic relief a little bit in his own way. So
we need to laugh, though. We always need to laugh.
Exactly.
And now I believe you live independently. You made the decision to leave your family home. What was that like, to go from being so supported with your mum and dad, your brother and sister, and then living independently?
It was hard, but I knew I needed to do it. I've always been very independent. And when I had to move back in with my parents after everything, I hated it. I was always knocking things over, that people would leave places and all of that. And I would say, I just had my own place. I could have everything in its spot. So that was kind of our driving force. And I also wanted to get back to school. So the first step towards independence was getting me back to college. And that involved learning how to walk with a white cane. I had to do months and months of mobility training. I had to learn Braille, which took about a year and a half. And I had to learn how to use technology. I'm on my laptop today. So I had to learn how to use my laptop, my iPhone, anything that would help me be independent. And it took me 8 months to get back to school. But even after that, I had to learn how to cook and clean. And it's just been a journey every day. Like when I try something new, I'm still learning how to do things independently. So it's definitely been a learning process. And
it must be kind of twofold. So there you are going back to school now as a blind student. So you're finding your way around, but how were people treating you? Because it's not just finding your own way, it's maybe prejudices from other people, how are they with you? And do they treat you differently or do they treat you the same?
Definitely treat me differently. Most people. There's been a couple of people through and through who have never treated me differently. And I think that says a lot about them. But a lot of people kept their distance. I related a lot to this pandemic that we're in. When you have your mask on, all of a sudden people don't look at you, they don't talk to you, they don't approach you. That's kind of how it's been with my blindness. And it doesn't come from a place of hate or anything negative. It just comes from people not knowing what to say. They don't want to say or do the wrong thing.
Really, isn't it? I've spoken to a woman whose little girl had been murdered. She was just 10 years old at a friend's party, and she said people would cross the road because they did not know what to say to her. It's just their own awkwardness, isn't it? But you would rather, I imagine, people just treat you as the Sarah Claudia that you always were before. There's nothing, your essence of you hasn't changed. It's just now you don't hear as well and you can't see.
Yeah, exactly. Just talk a little louder and make sure I don't run into anything. But other than that, we can hang out exactly how we used to. And that was the hardest thing for me when I went back to school, just friends treating me differently and not knowing how to treat me. And I wasn't really ready to deal with it 100% either. So I ended up isolating myself as well. So it was very, very lonely those first few months before I really learned how to interact with people as well. And for me, it's a lot of making people feel comfortable around me. I've learned that's just what I have to do.
But that sounds almost kind of one-sided, that it's you putting in more effort than other people.
Mm-hmm. It is, and it gets exhausting sometimes, but I know it's just because people haven't encountered a lot of blind people and they honestly don't know what to do. And I feel like as much as I can lead by example, then maybe the next person they encounter, they'll approach them and they'll know a little bit more of how to make people feel comfortable. And it's just treating people normal. It's not hard. It's not like a secret recipe or anything. It's just treating people normal.
You almost see yourself as a bit of an educator or educating people around blindness, because I guess beforehand, you said you find it hard now sometimes to connect with people. We can read people's faces. We can see, if there's a group of people chatting, if it's okay to make an in and go and speak to them. That must be taken away for you now. So it's hard to judge, like socially, is it okay to button here and say, hi, I'm Sarah Claudia?
Yeah, it gets kind of awkward in social situations. Exactly that point. And I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people don't even realize that. But a lot of times when I'm in large groups, I'll just kind of be quiet a lot of the time because I'm trying so hard to listen. And like you said, I don't know when it's okay to talk because a lot of that is from social cues. So it's definitely challenging. It's exhausting now to really be in large groups. So I don't do it that much anymore. I really prefer one-on-one these days. It's just a lot easier.
It must be. I'm with you there anyway. So you've got your own home. So everywhere in your own home is mapped out. So you don't get lost in your own home and you don't bump into things. It's much easier for you.
Right. I every now and then, if I get in a hurry, I will, and I'm not paying attention, I will bump into things. But no, I know my house. I have my appliances and my clothes and everything labeled in Braille. So it's very organized.
How difficult was it to learn Braille? Because, for a sighted person, we can see the bumps and no understanding how just by feeling that spells out something.
It actually, for me, I took to it pretty well because I started it in between when I wasn't back in college yet, and I missed school so much, and I just needed something to fill my time. So I really put my all into learning Braille. So I think because I focused on it so much, it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be, but it was definitely hard learning that tactile sensitivity with my fingers, and because the dots are so tiny. So it was different, but it was definitely a challenge that was worth it because it helps me out so much.
That sense of touch, has that increased since blindness?
Definitely. And I just notice things so much more. It's the same with my hearing as well. Even though I lost one ear, the hearing in one ear, my other ear is so heightened. Yeah.
You don't have two ears, you just lost the hearing in one.
Right. I always have to clarify that because I say that and then I'm like, no, it's still there. It doesn't work.
Two ears.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even just with the hearing in one ear, that has heightened.
Definitely. I just pay attention to it more. It's not that I have supersonic hearing. I just pay attention to the little things that most people might hear, but they don't really pick up on.
And your family is still very near, even though you're living by yourself. You said your mum and dad are just really up the road. So there is support there if you need it. And so now your faith is really, you think, what has supported you and what has propelled you forward into this space where you really are thriving with what's happened to you in really quite a short time.
Definitely. And, people say everything happens for a reason. And I don't know if I necessarily believe that. I don't believe God made this happen to me, but I believe that now that it has happened, God is using it for his glory. I believe that he has a bigger purpose for me because of what's happened. And I think that when you allow these hard situations that you face to make you better, you can find a purpose that's so much bigger than yourself and it's so much bigger than your pain. And that's kind of what keeps me moving forward, knowing that I'm encouraging others.
Yeah, I do believe things don't happen for a reason, but we can find purpose in the things that happen to us. And I read on your website that you said that your life is actually brighter now that you are blind. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes, and I was actually thinking about this the other day. I was sitting, I had just finished up visiting with a lady who I met through a speaking event, and I thought, my life is so full. And it's about finding light. Obviously, I can't, see literal light, but I've learned through my blindness that there are so many different forms of light. There's happiness and there's encouragement and positivity. And I have been able through my blindness to really harness that and think, okay, even in the darkness, you can find so much happiness and joy. And that's what I mean by my life is brighter, because I feel like it's so much more full. I'm able to encourage people and I'm doing so much more than I was when I was 20 years old before all this happened. So I'm thankful for how God has used me.
And what's really lovely about your website is that it's really through the eyes of a young person. So it's about dating, disability dating and, hanging out with friends. And it's just really good. It's not just about blindness or being deaf. It's like really through a young person's eyes. It's good to see.
Thank you.
Do you find yourself in, associating yourself now with people that are disabled or staying with the same people that you were with before? What kind of circles do you mix in?
It's definitely a mixture. I've made some really wonderful friends who are also blind, I have a lot of close friends, but they are close in a different way because they can understand what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And I've also made friends who are paralyzed, in wheelchairs, just all sorts of people, and just people who have gone through traumas, and I feel like I can relate to them more. So it's definitely a mixture, and I have wonderful friends who are completely able-bodied as well. So I'm thankful for all the people I've met through
Loads of different
my
types of
situation.
people. So tell us more about your speaking career then, now that you speak out and share your story, don't you?
Mhm. Yes, I love sharing my story, my testimony, and I speak mostly at churches, at small groups, different organization meetings, things like that. But I just like to share my story, kind of like I did today, and just share how I've gotten through it. And a lot of times I like to have like a theme that goes around what's going on in the world. I have a speaking engagement next week. It's actually on election day, the
Wow.
US election day. So I'm talking a lot about choices, how we have important choices and how when bad things happen, we can always choose joy, because that has been a big thing for me. Happiness wasn't as automatic for me after I lost my sight, and I had to make the conscious decision to wake up every day and say, yes, I'm still blind, but I'm still going to choose to make the most of this day and be happy.
And I think initially we have to grieve, we have to go through the trauma, and you had to have cried and
Oh,
been
yeah.
angry and all the rest of it. But then eventually, once we work that through our body, then we go, okay, what am I going to do with it now? Whatever happens to
Exactly.
us. But it is really important, because I love that word choice. I do believe if we really choose to, we can learn to live with anything or get over anything that happens to us. And yeah, you are a shining example of that. And you also coach people as well, is that right?
No, I have a podcast where I just like to have other people on who have faced, similar situations or just different kinds of traumas or tragedies, in the hopes that it will encourage other people who are going through similar situations. Just seeing how people have found light in their dark situations is so encouraging, I think, to others, no matter what they're going through.
So you learn from other people as well, even though you are a shining light as well. You are really shine. You're like a lighthouse. You're shining light for other people to light up their path. So what kind of things do you think really helped you to get where you're at today?
Definitely my faith, definitely having a support system. My family was a huge support to me. And I know that I'm blessed with the family that I have, and not everybody has that. But I would say to people, if you don't have that family support, finding it in friends or mentors or teachers, because having other people who can give you that tough love and kind of give you that nudge forward is so important. And I call my mom probably 100 times a day, and she's always encouraging and pushing me forward. So that's been a big reason I'm where I am today.
Yeah, one question that just came to my mind. Your faith really changed literally overnight, from just going because you had to go to church now, but really speaking to God. Did it change your parents' faith as well?
I think initially they distanced themselves from the Lord a little bit, definitely from church, and just because they saw me go through something so hard, and they thought, why would God let this happen to our family? But when they saw the change in me, that definitely kind of brought them back around. Because like I said, we all grew up Christians, and it's been important to us, but we'd never gone through anything so hard. But definitely when they saw that change in me, and saw what God was doing in my life, that brought them back around. So I would definitely say yes.
So you
It's
believe
definitely changed
really
them.
now that this is your purpose, that you're living the life that you're meant to live.
Definitely.
Can you explain a
Definitely.
bit more about that?
Yeah, I feel like my purpose in all of this, and I always want to say, there's purpose. You can find purpose in your pain, which I know a lot of people say that, but it's so true. And I think my purpose is more than just being an advocate for people with disabilities. It's showing people that no matter what your circumstances are, you can always find light. You can find that positive side. You can always move forward, make yourself better, and help other people along the way. And I feel like that's my purpose, and definitely sharing how through your trust in God, you can face anything. I mean, he's always there, he's ever present, and he's never going to leave you high and dry. There's so many times where I felt alone, where I just had to pull out my audio Bible, dive into scripture, and just start praying. And immediately he is so comforting.
Oh, you really are a shining example of finding light and joy even through your darkness. And I'm just so grateful that you took time out today to come onto my show. So thank you so much, Sarah Claudia. And I just wish you well with everything else that you do in life.
Thank you. And I do want to mention my book. I have my first book coming out.
What's your book called?
It's going to be called Blind Faith Devotional, 30 Days of Finding Light, Building Faith, and Choosing Joy. So it's a collection of devotions that will walk you through 30 days of kind of my story and experiences that I've had before, during, and after my sight loss.
So you're writing it at the moment?
It is, I'm self-publishing it, so it's all written, and I'm in the process of getting all the final details put together, and hopefully soon I'll have a release date. I'm hoping definitely before Christmas, so put it on your Christmas list.
We'll add it onto the show notes here so we can let people know. Well, I'll stick a link to your website as well so they can find out all the details about you and your up and coming book. So we wish you well with your new publication, and I hope it flies. Thank you so much.
Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeline Black, playing now on all the main platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher for Android, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and